Hey everyone, before we dive right into the action, I wanted to let you know that I stream these things on Twitch, and if you wanna hang out with me while I'm live, you can follow the channel, will be the first link in the description. Let's try to seek for a new one, and against d4, just gonna be going for the fianchetto, and on knight f3, this could be perhaps a London system. So he goes h3, still decent odds that he's playing the London, I told you. I can see the future. So, on the London, because we're using this move order, a pretty tricky setup could be to actually just delay playing knight f6 and focus on a quick push with e5. This is actually pretty annoying setup and something that gave me some headaches while preparing this line for my course. But thing is, I recommend something different, like not this h3 move, and I play something with bishop to f4, d6, and then I play it anyways with like e4, so that doesn't really affect it much, and we just transpose to like normal King's Indian lines that I recommend most of the times. So against e3, just gonna pursue with e5, hitting the bishop, expecting bishop h2. That's like the typical move. It doesn't really make much sense to take for him. I guess that's doable, but it like really allows, also allows knight takes, like going for the endgame could be pretty interesting, but I would say most of the times just taking with a pawn and trying to get in the typical King's Indian play. So I would expect bishop back onto that diagonal, even though this is also doable. I don't think it's that logical though. So I would definitely have this sort of as the like only serious candidate. But okay, against like bishop g5, I think we simply play like f6. That's what I had in mind. And okay, on bishop g3, now it's really important question to answer, like how do we develop the g8 knight? Because pretty sure you already noticed that knight f6 drops the e5 pawn, so that's not an option. Could perhaps go e4, but that will allow knight d4. And if you want to go for like the crazy complicated c5 move with the idea that okay, maybe we can win the pawn on b2, then I think opponent has knight to b5. And if we take on b2, there's like a pretty nasty fork on c7, because you don't have to forget about the London bishop. So I think immediate play is not the way to go, but develop the knight either to h6 or to e7, and this way we're also keeping ideas to go for like the quick f5 push. And I think I'm gonna be using the knight e7 move. It just seems a bit more natural, even though h6 is also doable in a lot of positions. I just think knight e7 is maybe a bit more logical in this specific scenario, and also in like some positions if there's no h3 on the board, knight f5 could be a huge positional threat to eliminate the dark square bishop. So it's not really in this position because they have bishop back, but definitely something you want to keep in mind. I think perhaps we may have used that idea previously in the rating climb. So okay, we see bishop e2, and now, for instance, what we could consider is knight f5, bishop h2, and e4. Because now on knight d4, we get an additional option to take with a knight, which could lead to interesting play. But do I want to go for that? I think that's like definitely doable. I could also just castle. That's also fine. Not sure how I want to play this. Like knight f5 looks really appealing here. I could also go for like the slower game. Kind of like knight f5, a bit concrete, going with e4, and just basically get like a well-defined pawn structure, and you can just push now. I think it works pretty well, creating a double attack. So knight d4 kind of only move, and I think we're like in a pretty good position after knight takes on d4. Especially because I think we can potentially follow it up with like castle and just typical f5, f4. Also, like quickly considering whether taking with the bishop can be good. It's normally not, but you know, thinking about like queen g5, castles, knight h4, hoping for like a sweet checkmate, but doesn't really seem to be working. And I think we'll just have to stick with a simple knight captures. And now, if I do queen g5, he's gonna castle, and don't think we have an immediate follow up there. But how about I throw knight b6 in first, attacking the pawn? I think that's like pretty good. And I'll explain why, because I think he has to play c3. He might forget about the flat also, but I think he has to do c3 just to sort of defend the pawn. And when they do c3, I had in mind to play queen g5, hitting the pawn, and if they castle, I'm gonna be taking with the bishop, taking advantage of the pin, which was not a thing with the knight on d7, because it was blocking the bishop. So that's why I had to play this first, and that's basically what I have in mind now. So I'm like really hoping he plays c3, because if they castle, I think we just have to like go for the pawn grab and play an endgame. So it can get even more interesting if we get c3, queen g5 on the board. Honestly, there's no like other way to defend, like bishop e5 can't really be a good move. I think worst case scenario, we trade everything, so pawn on e5 would be weak in that endgame, and we see c3 on the board finally. So just gonna follow it up with my main idea, hitting the g2 pawn. If they play g3, that would be a terrible move for the h2 bishop, restricting it completely. And yep, rook g1, they're losing the right to castle, so definitely most natural move was what he did, which is short castle. But now remember that we have this trick in reserve, which is the main reason why we have started with knight b6 here, to open up the bishop's path. And now, after they castle, you can just collect the free pawn, threatening mate, and only move for them would honestly be to play bishop g3 and avoid the checkmate while unpinning. And against that, I think we simply have to step back all the way to e6, and maybe they can take on c7 in like a decent version, but I think definitely the h-pawn is more valuable than the c-pawn, especially because the h-pawn plays a pretty huge role in protecting the king. So after this, I think we can simply continue with either pushing the h-pawn, that would be the sort of aggressive way, or the other plan, just going for the typical King's Indian play with f5, f4. And opponent is offering a queen trade, which honestly I'm like pretty okay about, because we might be getting into an endgame where we are having the extra pawn, which is pretty nice. But if I take and they take, white is having a double attack, so they're pretty likely to regain the pawn. So I'm actually not that sure I want to allow it, but I'm pretty sure it's also maybe a slightly better endgame for me. So I think against queen d2, best would honestly be just drop the queen back, keep c7 defended, keep the extra pawn, and yeah, follow it up with short castle, bring the rook in. Okay, on queen e3, I think just need to protect the e4 pawn. So gonna do f5. We also have knight d5 idea as an additional thing, and just gonna do like castle, and then we'll have a huge threat of going f4, because bishop takes allows knight d5, attacking both the queen and the bishop. So okay, we see f3, wondering if we can do short castle still, and after pawn takes, do f4, but it's like no longer working. So against this, I think we might just have to start with knight d5 right away, hitting the queen, and I'll probably have to step back, maybe all the way to c1. But I have a feeling opponent will play queen d2 there. But in case of queen c1, I think maybe just castling is fine. So I'm just gonna make a move and basically we'll see what my opponent has in mind. Queen c1, I think we could also just do the castling thing. So I'm like really expecting them to do this. By the way, and we play e3 f4, just locking everything. And we have like a pretty overwhelming advantage. But in case of queen c1, we're gonna go short. And if pawn takes, just take back, trade things on the f file. My rook will be faster into the game than his a1 rook, and I think we're having very good control over the position. So queen f2 would pretty much be met in maybe similar fashion, even though we get an additional trick to go f4. But I think same e3 f4 is just even more precise. And okay, opponent finds queen c1. That's actually a pretty good find. Just gonna be castling, keeping it simple, and the main point is that c4 will run into bishop takes on d4 with check. So that's why it's not a good move. And I think idea next would be to maybe still simply take. So okay, we see c4. Told you it's not good because hangs the pawn. King h1 or king h2. Okay, on bishop f2 could simply trade. Also think about doing this if we need it. I think trading is fine, especially when we're up so much material. I think I kind of like that idea more, to be honest. So just gonna try to keep it simple from now on. Could throw in e3, rook f1, knight f4. Oh, I think I've got a sweet tactic for you. So watch this: e3, rook f1, knight f4, queen e3, queen g5, and then we have knight h3 coming. That's gonna be like pretty sweet. So how we can actually get that on the board. So he's gonna take the pawn because I'm attacking bishop, so he's also protecting it. Okay, sadly he just hangs the queen, but I'll show you the tactic in the post-mortem. Now we actually just get the checkmate over the board. So presses the resign button, but okay, was actually like pretty cute tactic. Like if they go queen e3, queen g5, and threatening mate, right? So queen f2, knight h3, winning the queen, and rook f2, same knight h3, and picking up the e3 queen. That would have been pretty sweet, I think. So we managed to get this one in as well. Thanks a lot for making it this far into the video. And in case you're looking for more episodes from the same series, make sure to click one of the videos that will appear on the screen. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'll see you around on the channel. Take care.